Hey there, back at you today with some more RTD news updates. And today's articles come from more of a variety of articles around the globe, and it has to do a lot with currency, gold, and what's happening here locally in the United States. So before we dive into this one, I'll give you a quick peek as to what some of the topics are. We have Deutsche's gold claim of 1700. We got some Obamacare from Ron Paul. We have Armstrong's talking about Illinois' deficit. We have EU government pension deficit, and then we have the report of out in Finland a basic income. So before we get started, let's dive into this first one. Like always, if you find this informative, please feel free to share it to get the word out there to help more people become more monetarily aware. As well as if you're new to this, please subscribe to stay in tune with more news updates as well as RTD interviews, which are on the way. So first article here, Daily Reckoning. Here's a article from James Rickards, and for those that are familiar with his work, he's more of a global type of guy who focuses primarily on the SDR, special drawing rights, and so he, a lot of his work is done on gold and SDRs, dealing with yuan or whatnot. So here, article entitled "New World Money." So basically, talks about that on September 30th, 2016. The yuan basically becomes a part of the overall basket of global currencies. And so through this article here, he goes through and just lists several reasons as to why that will be important. And the first one starts off with the idea that there hasn't been any changes to the SDR basket since 1999 with the removal of the German mark and the French franc and in replace for the euro. And since then, when the gold SDR was basically abandoned in 1973, there haven't been much change over the last 30 plus years. So this is another historical moment in the fact that they are now opening up the competition by adding the yuan into the basket. So only twice in the last 40 or about 40 years or so has this happened. So monumental in that fact alone. So as we move further through this article here, it basically just gives a little picture here, I think, which is kind of interesting that you have the pound, the dollar, the yen, now the yuan, and the euro. So these two currencies here are considered a part of the basket of what he considers the new world money as far as options that governments will have to basically, borrow from in terms of SDRs or whatnot and invest in and things like that. So definitely some interesting times with this just in and of itself. So he goes on through the article to mention how over the last couple of years the Chinese yuan has surpassed a lot of other currencies, and the overall usage has basically risen according to his statistics at least 1% per year as far as it being used more and more and more. So it's good to say that once it becomes officially integrated into the basket of currencies, it will be used even more. And then he mentions here about this, the idea that China isn't really even being transparent on their gold holdings. And so as time goes on, they're going to be forced to kind of come out with some more realistic numbers other than what they've been sharing. And so he wraps up down here. We're just talking about the idea that the global reserves will be announced eventually, and that ultimately the SDR inclusion of the yuan will be a game changer for China as well as the dollar in general, as far as those that will have more options outside the dollar. So just plays into the idea that more people will begin rethinking the dollar, just because you won't really have to solely use that. You can use the yuan now as far as investing and things like that, and just doing trade amongst countries. So that's what's going on in the news. If you're interested, check it out below. Here's the next article, which is kind of alarming, but yet interesting, that some Deutsche Bank's analysts, commodities research analysts, as it says here, Michael and Grant, have basically come out with some, evidence saying that on a minimum, gold should be at least $1,700 an ounce. And so just briefly, it gives you an explanation as to why that is. And it says the bank's argument for why gold should trade at this level revolves around the balance sheet expansion of central banks during the past 8 years. The aggregate balance sheets of the world's 4 main central banks, the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Japan, and the People's Bank of China, has increased by 300% since the beginning of 2005. So basically, they've counterfeited and brought into existence, 300% more than was prior to 2005. During the same period, the global above ground stock of gold increased by only 19%. So the paper increased by 300%, or the balance sheets of the banks increased by 300%, but yet the actual physical tangible gold itself has only increased by 19%. to about 20% in value terms, assuming the price of gold should appreciate to keep the overall value of the big four aggregate balance sheets equivalent to that of the value of the above ground gold stocks. Then the gold should be trading at closer to 1700. So for all that counterfeiting and all that, increase and expansion of the monetary base in all these regions here, in comparison to the amount of gold that came out of the ground, to balance all that out, he's saying at a minimum it would be 1700. But yet, those who actually know, the fuller scope of things know that if you look at the total monetary base, especially here, with the Fed and all the things we don't know about, 1700 is on the very low end. That's what it should be already prior to all that market manipulations, in my opinion. So just a couple graphs here shows you just how the PBOC, how their expansion, how they've been just creating and creating and creating. We have the Bank of Japan has just been going through the roof. Central bank is going up and up. Federal Reserve is going up and up. And so the thing is, these balance sheets here, in my opinion, can never go down, just because in order to keep things working, keep things operating, keep the illusion that things are going well, they have to keep creating. That's the only way the system continue to float and stay up and running. So other than that, that's pretty much it. Things down below, just more insight into those claims. But other than that, when you have bank analysts, and especially Deutsche Bank, being in trouble and having admitted to rigging the precious metal markets, this is something that can be considered quite alarming, in my opinion. So if you're interested, you can check it out below. Here's an article here from the Mises Institute written by former Congressman Ron Paul, and it's in reference to the whole Obamacare meltdown. And so the right lessons from Obamacare's meltdown. And he basically just paints an overall picture of how just this whole idea of free healthcare has really plagued to hurt many of the people who it was intended for, and how it's now affecting the actual healthcare providers to where everyone is, for the most part, trying to get out of it. And then the twisted part is the fact that those who kind of have a distorted viewpoint of the whole Obamacare concept don't really blame the legislation and the idea of free healthcare, but they actually blame the actual individual healthcare providers and want them to be penalized and taxed. And they want to point the blame on the healthcare providers, not realizing that they're in the business of providing healthcare for a profit. Nothing is free, but yet that's how a distorted reality can cause people to point the blame at the wrong person or wrong entity, for that matter. So basically, it goes on to the decision of several major insurance companies to cut their losses and withdraw from Obamacare exchanges, combined with the failure of 70% of Obamacare health insurance co-ops, will leave 1 in 6 Obamacare enrollees with only one health care insurance option. If Obamacare continues on its current track, most of Americans may resemble Pinal County, Arizona, where no one can obtain private health insurance. It says, unfortunately, if not surprising, too many are drawing the wrong lessons from Obamacare's difficulties. Instead of calling for repeal of Obamacare and all other government interference in the healthcare market, many are calling for increased penalties on those who defy Obamacare's individual mandate in order to force them into the exchange. So, great article here. I pretty much summarize it for the most part, but it basically says that because of all this government involvement, it's basically those doctors and private institutions that are in the business to provide healthcare at a profit, they're just basically going to either shut down or just choose to opt out of serving those who are dependent upon government healthcare. So other than that, it's just paints a picture of how how bad things from that originate from the government really is. I mean, the government, as most people say, can't really add any value other than just removing value and money from those who work hard and giving to those who don't. So more information below if you're interested. Definitely a good article. Check out. Here's a article here from Armstrong Economics, and it has to do with just more of the, as he put it towards the end of this, sovereign debt crisis is underway and in our midst here in the United States of America. And so he talks about Illinois here, and Illinois, as well as a couple other states, are really suffering as far as having promised more than they will ever be able to repay. And this has to do with the idea of they're actually entertaining the idea of amending the Constitution, the state constitution, to basically say that the most important thing is for pensioners to be paid over the state being able to actually pay its bills in order to stay and function with public services and just all the obligations that's due from the state. And so basically here it just talks about, in reference to something happened in New Jersey, they basically made that amendment, and then it says on the ballot in November, coming up, or it's coming up rather, there will be a provision to amend the state constitution to put employee pensions before everything else. The people are generally kept ignorant of what that means to property taxes and the future of the state. Therefore, the average person will say, sure, I should get my pension, so they should also. So Illinois, is basically saying it should declare bankruptcy. It's simply inevitable. There is absolutely no hope for Illinois whatsoever. Every year they will take more, they have to pay more and more. If the state who manages the pension money loses, well, the taxpayers have to cover those losses as well. So basically talk about the pensions here. So anyway, he's basically saying it's time to just turn out the lights in Illinois. Welcome to the sovereign debt crisis. This is a contagion you will finally start to hear about, but only after the elections. Why spoil the party? So, just chaos here at home, in Illinois, with the fact that they are, operating in a major deficit there, and it only will get worse. So you're definitely a good article if you're interested. Here's another short article from Martin Armstrong or Armstrong Economics, and it has to do with the idea of the pensions exploding to 6.3 billion euros in the EU government. And so what's funny, it's real short, but basically here it talks about how the parliamentary members are basically just, out for themselves. And it says here that, it's not really, this idea here is not really mainstream yet, but yet from what he's gathered, they have, great benefits, but yet they also get perks just for showing up to pretend if they're voting. So just their mere appearance, into the parliament area for whatever they may want to do or have to do or, don't need to do, they basically get to swipe an additional card where they get 304 euros per day. And so it says here, some people just show up, without even have to really, report in or work, and just swipe their card. And then they get 304 euros just for showing up on top of their monthly salary of 8,000 euros, for doing nothing basically. So it's interesting how, policies are set up, and those who are in control, the governments, things like that, always find ways to line their pockets even more with some type of extra benefit or perk that makes the job they have very enticing to keep. So a little brief article here, but just interesting how the euro basically has been exposed for a swiping a card for additional money and fees that I'm sure the people there in the EU area, especially in Brussels, have no idea that they the people that represent them have that option. So just more corruption in the making. Articles below if you're interested. Here's the last article here, and it has to do with, as I mentioned earlier, basic income in Finland. And so they're basically in the process now of about to begin a trial of randomly selecting 2,000 to 3,000 citizens already on unemployment benefits. They'll receive a basic monthly income of 560 euros, which is approximately $600. This basic income replaced their existing benefits. So they're basically just going to, swap out, a guaranteed benefit for something that would be considered an experiment, keep it at the same rate. And so here, this article here basically just talks about how Finland has been, for the last year or two, trying to find ways of using trial experiments to see if it works on a broader scale. And one of the things that makes this interesting is the fact that they are kind of pinpointing the fact that governments worldwide will be looking into this and looking at this trial and seeing how it works and how it doesn't work, with the idea of this possibly becoming with a solution probably for several other governments on a major scale. And even though there's only 5 million people in this country, 2,000 or 3,000 will kind of, I guess, paint a picture for them on as to whether or not this can be something that can be implemented, in other bigger and wider nations. So it just talks about some of the things that this experiment will kind of pinpoint and highlight. Is one, basic income is the most comprehensive political reform of our century so far, and it talks about the idea that there's countries that's going to be looking at this and seeing if it can be implemented. And then two, here's the Finnish basic income experiment is officially referred to as an incremental reform on the welfare model, not as an indicator of complete paradigm shift. So they're trying to do away with the whole welfare aspect to see if this can help reduce poverty and things like that, and make things more equal for its citizens. How they come up with that, I don't know, because $600, I'm sure in Finland is a drop in the bucket. I imagine the cost of living there is extremely high. and says the basic income trial is a part of a larger shift in policy making. So, as they mentioned here, they have a lot more things as far as pieces of legislation that they're looking to implement in a trial basis. So this one here is just going to be one of many that they're saying is going to come in Finland, which can be, used as a model for other governments on a grander scale. So other than that, this is the news for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As I mentioned before, share it. Let's get the word out there, help other people become more monetarily informed on things happening around them and to them, more importantly. And then also, if you're new to this, subscribe. I want to try to increase the subscriber base so that we can reach more people. So I can't do it without your help. And other than that, until tomorrow, thanks.